If you're listening to your phones or hearing the memes, you may have heard former President Donald Trump saying all about Ohio Springfield eating cats and dogs eating pets. But is that really true? In Arizona is what actually happened. He actually said it again. If you don't believe me, take a look.
Donald Trump is not letting up.
They take in the geese. You know where the geese are? In the park, in the lake. And even walking off with their pets.
He's posting AI-generated images of himself hugging small animals and saving a kitten.
He's cracking up. He's under a lot of pressure, and he's cracking under that stress.
Some say he's under the influence of a far-right extremist, Laura Loomer.
I'm with the greatest president ever.
You are a very opinionated lady, I have to tell you that. And in my opinion, I like that.
Loomer has called Kamala Harris a drug-using prostitute, and just this week said the White House will smell like curry if Harris is elected.
She's a true hate monger.
Loomer pushed the cats and dogs story on her social media platforms, and some believe that's how Trump got it in his head.
They're eating the dogs.
She was with Trump on his plane in Philadelphia before the debate.
Your candidate is hanging out with her and actually listening to her and taking advice from her.
The day after the debate, Loomer traveled with Trump to the 9/11 commemorations in New York and Pennsylvania, despite once calling the attacks an inside job. Even right-wing firebrand Marjorie Taylor Greene is calling on Trump to dump Loomer.
Her rhetoric and her tone does not match the base, does not match MAGA, does not match most Republicans I know, and I'm completely denouncing it.
Take a look at these headlines on the Drudge Report. Civil war escalates. Campaign in crisis. Trump was asked about Loomer today in California.
I don't control Laura. Laura has to say what she wants. She's
Your
a
allies
she's a
have
free
expressed
spirit.
concern.
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, I can't tell Laura what to do. Laura's a supporter.
Nobody's eating cats. Nobody's eating dogs.
Singer John Legend was born and raised in Springfield, and he's coming to the defense of the city's 20,000 Haitian immigrants.
We all just want to live and flourish and raise our families in a healthy and safe environment.
That's a good statement, but in some states it's actually legal to eat your pets. I'm not. You know, so you said Donald Trump. No, what I'm actually saying is it's actually legal to eat your pet.
Think are illegal that are actually totally legal. Halloween edition. Number 1, backyard burials. Wow, Mike, those gravestones look so real. Thanks, they're actually my buried loved ones.
Haha, what?
Yep, in most states, as long as it doesn't conflict with zoning laws, I can bury my loved ones in my backyard.
Stop it!
Must be the wrong zone. Oh well, I got this. Number 2, owning a flamethrower.
Why do you have that? That can't be legal.
It's actually legal in 48 states, and in California, you just need a license.
Where's the ones that you can't have one?
Maryland.
Those crab cake loving fools.
We're screwed. Not today. Number 3, eating your pets.
What is that? Beef? Chicken?
Dog.
What?
Yeah, it's technically legal to eat your pets in 43 states.
But is it legal to feed them to zombies?
Now that would be an interesting case.
I told you, it's legal to eat pets. You eat your pet. It's legal. But let's look at the big picture. I mean, states allow you to eat your pets. The states have laws about it. In the past 6 years, U.S. government has enacted legislation prohibiting the conservation of cats and dogs. There's probably, I mean, in Ohio it's, 2018 Farm Bill, which includes the dog and cat meat treat. Excuse me. The 2018 Farm Bill, which includes the Dog and Cat Meat Treat Prohibition Act, bans the import, export, and slaughter of cats and dogs for human consumption. Well, this law makes it illegal to slaughter cats and dogs for food at the federal level. Exceptions exist for certain indigenous religions or cultural practices. However, it is important to note that other pets such as rabbits and guinea pigs remain legal to consume. I mean, this is when Donald Trump signed the bill. He signed the bill until he got out of office. Now he's coming back into office saying all this. They're eating the dogs, eating this, that, and the third. So most states it's legal, in other states it's illegal. By state, we probably will never know. Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, general dog slaughter is allowed in 44 states. In those 44 states, you can do that. We'll talk about this a bit later. First thing, did you know there could be a lawsuit that could face the tobacco industry? Stone Phillips is going to explain. And later, you'll meet the judge who let O.J. Simpson go, but didn't send him anger management courses. Never sent him to prison. Years ago. Please stay with us. Everybody's smoking these days. It could be you. But did you know there's something that could have the government foot the bill to the tobacco industry? We're about to show you something that could really help you out here and win your case from years ago. If you're one of the smokers from back then, this is the story for you. It's about footing the bill. And even then, once the government foots the bill, Congress can regulate nicotine as a drug. How can it be done? And what do smokers really need to know? Here's Stone Phillips.
Dayona McNair is living on oxygen from this machine and on borrowed time. Despite lung surgery, drug therapy, and repeated hospitalization, her doctor told her she'd be lucky to survive another 2 years. And that was a little over 2 years ago.
I'm on constant oxygen. I sleep under it. I can't go anywhere without it. If a young person could walk in my shoes for one day, I don't think they would ever pick up a cigarette.
Mrs. McNair is battling emphysema, a deadly lung disease that killed her husband earlier this year. He was a smoker, and so was she.
I quit smoking, but my husband was a chain smoker.
Did he try to quit?
He did quit 1 year before he died. But his lungs were gone. He had no lungs left.
We begged him, pleaded with him for many years to quit, telling him what the problems would be. But he just had a difficult time doing it.
The McNair's doctor, Boyd Shaw, says Mrs. McNair knows all too well that her days too are numbered.
She's aware of this, very aware.
And I live with it every day. That's why I don't want to see young people go through this.
At age 66, Mrs. McNair has become a soldier in the tobacco wars. Like many former smokers dying of lung disease, she's involved in a lawsuit that calls cigarettes unreasonably dangerous and accuses the tobacco industry of knowing full well that users would suffer disease, injury, and sickness. For years, tobacco companies have argued that they should not be punished when smokers know the health risks but light up anyway. And time and again, juries have agreed. But this lawsuit here in Mississippi is not about smokers assuming the risk. It's about taxpayers assuming the medical bills.
The tobacco industry came to Mississippi. They caused a lot of sickness, illness, and death, and we wanted to pay for it.
The landmark lawsuit is the brainchild of Mississippi Attorney General Mike Moore.
What we're saying is you pay your fair share.
And what's a fair share?
Well, in our state, unfortunately, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. And to Mississippi, that is a lot of money.
The state cuts thousands of checks each month to pay the medical bills of sick smokers. Some are state workers or retirees like Mrs. McNair, but most of the payments are made through Medicaid, the state and federal program that helps cover medical expenses for the poor. And every day, new bills arrive to be processed and paid by Mississippi taxpayers. And it's the same in every state in the Union. Taxpayers shell out $8.9 billion a year, according to this government report. Here at University Hospital in Jackson, Mississippi, doctors told us nearly half the patients coming out of surgery the morning we visited suffered from tobacco-induced diseases, with public funds paying for most of their care. Upstairs, we met Sally Parker, a smoker for 40 years who's being treated at taxpayer expense for a cancerous lung tumor, asthma, and emphysema. And though her doctor blames a life of smoking, Sally still craves a cigarette.
Oh, God, do I enjoy smoking. I really did. And wouldn't I if I could get a cigarette?
Her treatment alone, over a 20-year period, has cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so has Mrs. McNair's.
So you're looking at $15,000 or thereabouts in oxygen alone.
Right.
Medication on top of that, and 2 or 3 trips to the hospital every year, $25,000, $30,000 a shot.
That's right.
You know what the tobacco companies say? They say that people like you and your husband assumed a health risk when you chose to smoke.
But I didn't know the health risk when I started years ago. Neither did my husband. There was nothing mentioned about health risks. Tobacco is glamorous. Movie stars smoke. Beautiful girls smoke. Handsome boys smoke.
Mrs. McNair says she and her husband Rudy started smoking in their late teens, 20 years before the 1964 Surgeon General's warning about the potential dangers of smoking.
Cigarette smoking contributes substantially to mortality from certain specific diseases and to the overall death rate.
She says they were part of a generation sold on cigarettes.
He's the prize switch-hitting Yankee outfielder, Mickey Mantle. Say, Mickey, I see your brand is Camel. How about it?
It's not hard to see why more folks enjoy Camels than other brands.
Today, Mrs. McNair is left without her husband, left to fight for every breath she takes, and the taxpayers are left with the medical bills.
When there's an oil spill, I mean, who has to pay for the cleanup? The people who caused that. We want the tobacco company to come in and clean up their mess.
Attorney General Moore plans to argue the case himself, with help from dozens of private law firms looking to share any damages the state might be awarded. But even though the winnings could ease the tax burden on Mississippians, they don't all support the lawsuit.
It's just pile-on time against the tobacco companies, isn't it?
Governor Kirk Fordyce, an ex-smoker himself, says cigarettes never made him sick, but this lawsuit does.
My immediate reaction the day that it was filed was that it really makes me want to throw up.
You don't think this is about recovering costs for the state of Mississippi?
No, I think it's about enriching plaintiffs' lawyers.
You don't see any potential benefit to the taxpayers of the state?
No. I used to be a heavy smoker, and I made my own personal decision. I felt it was pretty harmful to me, and I quit. And that's the option that all smokers and all users of all tobacco products have, don't they?
So this comes down to personal responsibility.
I think that is probably the biggest issue in the whole thing.
And that's exactly what at least one tobacco company told us. In a letter to Dateline, the R.J. Reynolds Company said, average Americans who comprise juries understand what plaintiffs' attorneys seemingly do not, that each of us should be held responsible for our own choices in life.
They can't come to me as Attorney General of the state and point their finger and say, you chose to smoke, Mr. State, or you assume the risk.
I think it's going to be the major change in the legal landscape here.
NBC News legal correspondent Jack Ford.
Somebody who's doing sort of an end run around the personal responsibility argument. And it's the entire state of Mississippi coming into the courtroom rather than the individual smoker.
But where does a suit like this lead? I mean, what's next? Why not sue Smith & Wesson for making the gun that was used in a homicide? Why not go after Gillette for the razor blade used in a suicide attempt?
When you use a gun for what is intended to be used, it will not kill you. A razor blade, they never tell us to cut our throat with that razor blade. The tobacco companies, however, say, stick the cigarette in your mouth, inhale,
And don't worry about it. A cigarette will kill you when you use it as intended to be used. That's the difference. If the product is inherently dangerous,
then let's outlaw it. If there's something wrong with it, let's make it illegal. Let's quit persecuting businesses that are operating within the law.
Is it your goal to shut the industry down?
Not at all.
But it could certainly have that effect. Already, Mississippi's novel demand has been joined by Florida and West Virginia, and 8 other states are about to jump on the legal bandwagon. If all 50 states jump on, a court order to reimburse states for even a fraction of their bills could deal a serious blow to the tobacco industry.
If this lawsuit is successful, what you might see is the trumpeting of the end of the smoking industry, at least as we've known it.
We have to pay for the injuries caused by that industry, and we're going to keep on paying. We just want them to come in here and pay their fair share. I don't think it's too much to ask.
By the way, we contacted all of the tobacco companies named in the Mississippi lawsuit. None would agree to an on-camera interview. But in a letter, Philip Morris expressed confidence it could win, saying once again that it's the consumer's choice to smoke. In the meantime, Congress is getting into the act. Just last week, a bill was introduced that would allow the federal government to sue tobacco companies to recover the Medicare and Medicaid costs of treating people with smoking-related illnesses.
Taxpayers. That's what it's all about. The taxpayers. We pay those medical bills. We're paying for them. We're paying you out. We're paying for your mistakes. You chose to smoke. You could choose to quit, but you chose to ignore your doctor's advice when he tells you, "Hey, don't be smoking anymore. It's bad for your health." It's like the scene from The Ranch. I'm not doing Pilates. Pass. Try again. Eat steak and drink whiskey. It's exactly what it's like. And even then, you chose to smoke. You can quit. Nobody knows how hard it is to quit. If you're one of the smokers out there, your parents try to quit, they would tell you how hard it is to quit. And if you don't believe that, ask your mom and dad. They will tell you, yes, it is hard to quit smoking. No ifs, ands, buts, or excuses. I don't care if you look like all those models you see on TV. I don't care. It's your choice. You choose the behavior, then you choose the consequences. You choose to smoke, then this is what happens. Medical conditions apply, come on, and you and us taxpayers are giving you the bills. So it's like, oh, I'm got lung cancer. Here, taxpayers. Yeah, I need you taxpayers to help me pay the bill. Okay, then. Okay. We'll write the check. Okay, here's the check. Here's the check. But more has to be done. So the bottom line here is it's your choice. To smoke or not to smoke, that's your choice. Just ahead, a judge who did not give O.J. Simpson a jail sentence, but who let him off the hook. Stay with us. Earlier, we showed you a meme from Donald Trump all about they're eating the dogs and eating the cats. But is it really legal? Although it's widely considered taboo, the U.S. technically lacks state law banning the consumption of dogs and cats. But the Dog and Cat Meat Trade Protection Act prohibition that prescribes the transportation, delivery, processing, and slaughter of dogs and cats for human consumption. This act includes the exception of all rituals. Certain Native American tribes have history of a tradition of eating dogs, including the Kiko Drum in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. In general, dog slaughter is allowed in all 44 states of America. The only states that say no dog meat are California, Georgia, Hawaii, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, and Virginia. The rest of the states are legal. So in Texas, you can slaughter a dog, and you can probably eat that dog. In Africa, you can do it in Africa, Australia, in Europe. I mean, here it is. Alaska, illegal. Arizona, illegal, 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 illegal. All these states the growth rate from Alaska. All these states make it illegal. The HR bill from Congress. Let's listen in.
There are two summaries for H.R. 6720. Bill summaries are authored by CRS. Shown here, passed House without Amendment 09122018. Dog and Cat Meat Trade Prohibition Act of 2018. Secretary 2. This bill prohibits persons from knowingly slaughtering a dog or cat for human consumption. In addition, the bill prohibits persons from knowingly transporting, possessing, buying, selling, or donating 1. A dog or cat to be slaughtered for human consumption, or 2. Dog or cat parts for human consumption. The bill subjects a violator to a fine. The bill applies to conduct in or affecting interstate or foreign commerce or within the special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States. However, it does not apply to an activity carried out by an Indian for a religious ceremony.
That's the whole bill. Okay. While if you're watching the news in Los Angeles, you might have seen them shaking or freaking out. That was because of an earthquake. Take a look.
A rock and roll start to the day for people around Malibu, thanks to a 4.7 magnitude earthquake this morning. It's just the latest in a series of tremors that has some residents in Southern California on edge. Jim Murray reports.
TV news anchors freak out live on the air as an earthquake rattles Los Angeles.
Yeah, we're having an earthquake right now.
Whoa! Whoa! The Fox Sports studio was also rocked.
Earthquake. You know what we're saying? Oh, James, it's earthquake. We're rocking.
KCAL's TV assignment manager was startled.
Oh, that's a major earthquake.
Former E! News host Jason Kennedy shared this video of his frightened toddler, River. This woman is rattled.
There's an earthquake.
In this home in Malibu, a scaredy cat scrambles up the stairs. This employee has to hang on in a market, and this woman felt it while driving.
Y'all, we are literally having an earthquake right now, and I don't know if I stopped my car or not.
The 4.7 magnitude earthquake hit right outside of Malibu, but it could be felt 100 miles away. Now, Southern California residents are on edge after a swarm of recent earthquakes.
We've had a number of earthquakes over the last month. We know that it's unsettling.
Do these earthquakes signal that the big one could be on its way?
These magnitude 4 earthquakes, they're just normal for the region we live in. And the magnitude 7.8 earthquake that we've been talking about for years in Southern California is still going to happen at some point.
There's an earthquake.
Wow, there were at least 2 aftershocks following that initial quake in Malibu.
Think about that scene from The Big Bang Theory. Earthquake! Aftershock! Earthquake! Alright, you may remember we talked about the controversial song, this Texas Hold'em. How Beyonce stole the Franklin beat. Now she gets 0 CMA nominations for Cowboy Carter.
Reaction is pouring in after Beyonce was snubbed by the CMAs. 0 nominations despite her wildly popular country album, Cowboy Carter.
It is crazy that this incredible album did not get nominated.
The single Texas Hold'em was #1 on Billboard's Hot 100 chart for 2 straight weeks and became a pop culture phenomenon. Today, the ladies of The View are also weighing in.
I don't think she was snubbed. I think they just didn't, it wasn't for them.
0 nominations at the Country Music Awards is absolutely a snub, and it feels racist. I think the country music establishment does not see her as part of them.
Beyonce also finds herself on the steamy cover of the new October issue of GQ magazine. She says, "I was so hyped to see a song like Texas Hold'em gain worldwide acceptance. Even more exciting was how it helped reinvigorate the country genre across music, fashion, art, and culture."
Now it's time for Give Me a Break Second Look. This is inspired from Dateline NBC's A Second Look, where we take in this one we take a second look at all the issues we talked about. We talk about an issue, we would update, and then we take a second look at it. So in this case, it's time for a Give Me a Break Second Look. Our second look is going to be looking into Texas Hold'em. So far, what we're seeing here is basically Beyonce stealing the Franklin beat. The person who wrote basically what it's all about is this: Beyonce ripped off a turtle. The writer said that she's happy for her. It's gone all over as a pop national. It's gone all over the TikTok trend. And she got 0 nominations. 0 nominations. Because of what happened. Because of what happened. I mean, look. We've had the first African American play country music. Charlie Pride. Not just that, there's also Darius Rucker. He's black. I mean, you may nominate him for an award, but you're not going to nominate Beyonce? Whether she's country or not, she released an album, and then you don't want to be racist because you don't like Beyonce to be around country music. Give me a break. You may have your excuses. My excuse is country music is country music. It's all about the arts. It's just, it is what it is. When we return, the judge who let O.J. Simpson off for wife beating, why didn't he go to jail? You will get to hear the side of the story from the judge, as he says what he meant.
In a moment, the judge who's become the scapegoat in the O.J. Simpson case, should he have been tougher on O.J.?
You hit your wife, you hit your girlfriend, you ought to go to jail. It seems like it ought to be that simple.
Dateline takes a second look. Plus, twists and turns, Dateline's Picture of the Week. Please. From Los Angeles, here again is Stone Phillips. From Los Angeles, here again is Stone Phillips.
It's the question that everyone keeps asking. Why wasn't more done after O.J. Simpson pleaded no contest to beating his wife? Almost everyone has pointed the finger at the judge who ruled in that case. Tonight, in his first network interview, he gives us his side of the story in a Dateline Second Look.
Welcome back. If you hit your wife, you go to jail. If you hit your girlfriend, you go to jail. If you hit any woman, you're a coward. You're a coward if you hit a woman, if you hit your girlfriend, if you hit your wife, you're a coward and you're right in jail. That's exactly what happens. Any person that would hit their wife, fiance, or girlfriend is a coward and will wind up in jail. Domestic violence. Stitch. 30 years ago, if you were there 30 years ago, you may have heard O.J. Simpson gotten off on wife-beating charges after he hit his girlfriend. But what was more being done? Why wasn't he sentenced to jail? Why wasn't he sentenced to anger management classes? The finger was pointed at the judge who let him off. Why would he do it? Tonight, you will get to hear his side of the tale as he gives Stone Phillips a second look at what happened. Here's Stone Phillips.
This, unfortunately, is the result of the criminal justice system not doing the job that it must do in domestic violence.
By the end of last week, everyone had heard the story of O.J. Simpson's domestic abuse. The court of public opinion was in full session. And thanks to the efforts of Los Angeles prosecutors, Simpson's 1989 plea of no contest to spousal battery and his sentence was being dissected for all to see.
That was a horrible joke. It's a joke on our community, and look what happens as a result of that. Let me finish.
With authorities pointing the way, the media had found the first sacrificial lamb in the Simpson case. Judge Ronald Schoenberg was singled out as the man who let O.J. walk.
Specifically, the focus has turned to one judge, Ronald Schoenberg, who handled the Simpson case in the first place.
Prosecutors claimed the mild-mannered jurist was awed and intimidated by a celebrity defendant, that Schoenberg ignored their request for jail time and instead let Simpson off with a fine, 2 years probation, 120 hours of community service, and counseling for 3 months.
Every case requires special treatment. I try to treat every case according to the circumstances of the case.
The charge here is that you were starstruck. Heisman Trophy winner, NFL Hall of Famer, Hollywood celebrity, and that you let him off easy.
No, just it's that simple. If I was starstruck, then so was the city attorney.
But that's not what prosecutors say. Deputy City Attorney Alana Bowman.
We objected at the time to the sentence that was ultimately imposed. We asked for jail time in this case.
The sentence I gave Mr. Simpson was almost exactly the punishment recommended by the city attorney, Mr. Pengel.
Battered in the press, Schoenberg felt compelled to hold this extraordinary news conference last week. And when Dateline took a second look, the court transcript showed that in fact, prosecutors did recommend that Simpson not serve any jail time and be given probation.
Thank you very much.
But no sooner had the judge left his news conference than prosecutors were claiming they'd made their demand for jail privately to the judge. Prosecutor says the reason he came out against sending O.J. to jail in court was because in chambers, you had made it clear that wasn't going to happen.
Well, he says that now. He didn't say that before. If that were the case, and he was as frustrated as he was, what would you do? You would say nothing, right? But not come out and say, no, jail.
Are you suggesting that he is lying about this?
I don't know. I'm not going to say that. But
how do you explain the fact that the city attorney has such a different recollection of what happened?
I can recreate a lot of scenarios that would make me look terrific, but the truth is that I don't remember.
That Judge Schoenberg doesn't remember much about a case involving someone as famous as O.J. Simpson may seem odd, but court watchers say what prosecutors are claiming is stranger still, because no prosecutor insisting on jail would recommend probation in open court. You don't ask for something you don't want. You feel you're being scapegoated?
To some extent, yes.
The prosecutors make recommendations about the sentence, but the final decision is yours.
Oh, yes, I don't deny that.
In this case, you have a woman who was beaten so badly, she went to a hospital. She told police on the scene she feared for her life. I mean, if that isn't serious, what is it?
It's serious.
Judge Schoenberg says the fact that Nicole Simpson refused to press charges was one factor in the sentencing, but there were others.
At that time, the sheriff was begging us not to put people in jail because the jails were overcrowded.
Was that generally something that you were aware of and thought about as you handed down sentences?
Every judge was aware of it. People that were being put in jail would be out on the streets before we went home because the sheriffs were releasing on parole, and these people were getting the same community service that I was getting.
The reality is the problem of an abuser getting off lightly had less to do with one judge than with the system. Simpson's sentence was actually harsher than most being handed down to first offenders at that time.
The ones that got to court were very frustrating to watch.
Betty Fisher is the executive director of Haven Hills, a Los Angeles shelter for battered women. In 1989, she was a counselor, accompanying women like these to hearings like Simpson's.
It had to be something just really outrageous to get any kind of jail time.
O.J. Simpson came before you in September, several months after the sentencing, and said, and I quote, "We had one bad night in our life. I think we all understand what happened that night, why it happened, and I've taken steps to see to it that it can never happen again." Did you believe him?
I can't say I can't comment on that. I did order counseling to continue after that.
In the end, while the prosecutor's trial by media may have misfired on the judge, it's led the press to focus on the larger issue of domestic violence, a trend the judge applauds, even if it comes at his own expense.
There's a good result of that. People are becoming very aware of the problem. It's just unfortunate that I had to be used as that vehicle.
One footnote, here in California, more batterers are going to jail, but they're spending less time there. The average stay has dropped from 23.3 months in 1989 to 19.5 months last year. In the meantime, just today, O.J. Simpson's attorney agreed to give the prosecution a sample of O.J.'s hair after a cap was found at the murder scene with hairs that are of African-American origin. Also today, it was revealed that there are some 60 pieces of evidence that need to be tested. Tomorrow on Nightly News, a special insider's report on DNA evidence. What is it? Could it seal O.J.'s fate?
Okay. Common sense alert. Like I said in the beginning, you hit your wife, you go to jail. You hit your girlfriend, you go to jail. You hit your fiance, you go to jail. You hit your mama, you go to jail. You hit your grandma, you go to jail. You hit your aunt, you go to jail. You hit your step-parents, you hit your stepmom, and you're going to jail. You go to jail. Domestic violence, baby. It's not funny to hit a woman. It's a coward. For crying out loud. It is a fucking coward. Anybody that would hit a woman is a fucking coward. No ifs, ands, buts, or excuses. I don't care if you were pissed off that your girlfriend didn't make you any fucking dinner. You don't hit a woman. Ever. If my nephew were to hit a woman, I would be pissed. Or if I saw somebody in this community hit a woman, I'd be pissed. Really good. I'd be pissed. You don't ever hit a woman. And if you did, you would not only end up in this broadcast, but you would end up in the hands of the Corpus Christi Police Department. No ifs, ands, buts, or excuses. Come on, 19 and a half months? But for O.J. Simpson, he had community service hours. Not only community service hours, he had counseling. No, just because you're famous doesn't mean you get harsher sentences. Does it matter? Yes. Rules of everybody. There ain't no special privileges for everybody, especially those celebrities. All right. But still, this is the bottom line here. Domestic violence is no joke. Women should not be hit. You should never hit a woman ever. And if you did, you'd be spending time in jail, thinking about what you've done. And then you'd be counseled on how to treat your women, on how to treat women with respect. Mind you, I would never, ever hit a woman. Ever. No ifs, ands, buts, or excuses. I think the O.J. Simpson case would teach us all about how not to hit women. And telling us, hey, you know, if you hit a woman, this is what can happen to you. You can face jail time and you can face community service hours. And counseling. We gotta go back to 19.5 months instead of doing less time. There needs to be counseling while in jail. You know, counsel would sit down with the inmate and say, okay, you know, this is what I mean. All counselors visit the jail cell and say, okay, we're here today because you guys would think it's okay to hit women. You think it's cool. It's not cool. It's not in these video games where you get to hit a woman. And it's not funny. I don't know why I'm smirking. Because you're dating somebody, your dad found out you hit their daughter. Oh boy. Their dads are going to body slam you. And like that one girl that we saw on yesterday's Bravo break, he was all like, I told you stop playing with me, and the gangster was all like, it's like, I mean, people just say, oh, come on, this is a joke. It's not a joke. People have been jailed for domestic violence. Especially, look what happened to O.J. Simpson. You think domestic violence is a joke? You think it's cool? It's cowardly. Domestic violence is not cool. It's no joke. You could go to jail. You could even face community service hours, like what O.J. Simpson did. And if I were you, I would not be in O.J.'s shoes. Ever. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. You know there's an old saying that time heals all wounds. If you listen to a Tracy Lawrence song, then you best believe it probably can. But for one person you'll meet, it was a half-century ago during World War II. And at that time, this POW that you're about to meet, he murdered the son-in-law. But he was probably undergoing post-traumatic stress. And as you're about to see, over a half-century later, a wound would never heal in time. Here's John Larson.
911. Yeah, there's been a shooting on Carfax Avenue.
In this quiet Long Beach, California neighborhood, a scene of almost otherworldly violence, an elderly man, gun in hand, chases his bleeding, unarmed son-in-law down the sidewalk. The younger man screams for help and falls. His pursuer pumps 4 more shots into his back and leaves him dying. A case of cold-blooded murder, a calculated crime of vengeance, or the result of a living nightmare, a flashback to the horrors of a world war long since over? Those were the questions Richard Keach faced at trial. For the answers, he evoked a long-distant place and time.
Does it in some ways seem like yesterday?
It always will seem something like yesterday.
For Richard Keach, yesterday is May 1942. One of the most famous battles of the South Pacific. The Japanese are overrunning Corregidor, the island that guards the mouth of Manila Harbor. The 22-year-old Marine crouches in his foxhole on the beach, ready to fight to the death.
No way we could hold off the entire Jap onslaught.
Then the unthinkable happens. Surrender.
You watched him raise the white flag.
We actually cried. He should have died in battle. We should never have been surrendered.
To his shame, Richard Keach became a prisoner of the Japanese. For the next 3.5 years, he endured vicious beatings, starvation, forced marches through steaming jungle, and brutal torture. He watched his closest friends die, and more than once, he gave himself up for dead.
Captured enemy films show Americans rounded up and herded into Jap torture camps.
His ordeal began here, on this slab of concrete. There were 7,000 Allied prisoners crammed together in the stifling heat for weeks without food or water.
They were starving.
Literally.
Exactly. Starving to death.
Richard Keach clung to life, but as he grew weaker, losing 72 pounds, he reached a turning point. No longer could he bear the scorching sun, the back-breaking labor, or the scorn of the Japanese guards.
If I ever hated anybody, I hated those Marine guards.
So he decided to defy them. One night, the commandant, a particularly sadistic Japanese lieutenant known as the White Angel, was taunting 600 American prisoners.
He said, I have learned that some of you boys have stated that you don't like it here. Would you step out? I thought what a glorious way to die. So I step out. 2 Marine guards in front of me, they turn them loose and they'll beat me to death.
To his astonishment, Keach was not struck down, but sent to a Japanese military hospital to regain his strength. It was a defining moment. He had faced death, challenged death, and won.
I lost all sense of fear.
Like many World War II veterans, Keach eagerly returned to civilian life. He graduated from college, got married. He had 4 children, a career as a purchasing agent for a defense contractor. He rarely mentioned his time in the prisoner of war camps.
And you thought you would put this whole experience behind you?
You have to go on. You can't forget it. You got to get on.
Oh, because of the weather.
Yes.
But the calm surface of that measured life would be disrupted by events that began in the unlikeliest of places. France, 1991. Richard Keach's youngest daughter, Nancy, was winding up a job as a rides engineer for Euro Disney.
So I met Nick at my going away party, actually, and I thought he was very charming.
Nancy Keach fell in love with Nicholas Candy, an engaging British contracts manager and former rugby player.
At the time, I was just so overwhelmed. I just went head over heels.
The couple were married that June on the Queen Mary. At first, Richard Keach welcomed his new son-in-law into the family. But 3 years later, when his daughter and Candy had a son, things began falling apart.
He had not bonded with Martin. Martin and I were just our own little family. We lived in the same house, and Nick was really just doing whatever he wanted to do.
You can't come in.
His daughter filed for divorce and moved back home with her parents. A fateful decision because it put her father, Richard Keach, in the middle of an ugly custody dispute. Candy picked up the baby for visits 4 days a week. The conflicts intensified with each encounter.
She was being subjected each time to an escalating campaign, really, of abuse.
And Nick Candy left messages on their answering machine, threatening messages that the family saved.
Hey, don't mess with me. I swear to you, you're going to lose. And I'm going to be, as I said, your worst goddamn nightmare. I'm going to be watching every move you make.
And I knew what that meant. I knew I would be dead sooner or later. He would get me.
Jocelyn Candy Bunyan, Nick's sister, says her brother was not a violent man.
There's absolutely no way Nick would get into brawls. He's the one that would try and stop a brawl.
She remembers he was very attached to his son.
He was absolutely the proudest, most excited father.
The turning point came one day when Candy took the baby to an emergency room, saying he had pneumonia. Nancy Candy and her father rushed to the hospital.
My dad walked up behind me to look closer at the x-ray, and Nick said, I don't want him there, and he shoved my dad. My dad bounced against the wall.
The next day, Richard Keach bought a gun. After that, when Nicholas Candy came to pick up his son, Keach, not his daughter, handled the transfers.
And I had the pistol under my belt, under a jacket, and felt safe, if you will.
For 5 months, Keach stuck that gun in his belt every time he handed over his grandson. The mutual antagonisms festered. The Keaches say Candy repeatedly called the child abuse hotline, claiming they were mistreating the baby. And Candy accused them of denying him his court-ordered visitations. Then came the day of the murder.
He came storming up the walk, telling me I was a liar, a despicable person. The guy is livid. And I step through the doorway and walk out. Mr. Candy is jumping up and down. All of a sudden, he's in a crouch. And he's got his left hand back, his cocked. He's got a sucker punch. He's bragged about it. It's a 10-pound sledgehammer. I realize I'm going to get beaten to death. I'm going to beat him. This guy's got 60 pounds on me in 40 years. I pull out the gun and shoot him.
The sound of the gun firing, Keach says, triggered a powerful flashback.
First time I ever fired it. The sound sort of brings me back 50 years, and as near as I can describe it, it's the sort of feeling I'd have had if I'd shot at the guard. There's no way I'm ever going to survive it.
Richard Keach says he doesn't remember what happened after that. He doesn't remember chasing Nick Candy down the street. Doesn't remember hearing his calls for help. Doesn't remember firing the second or the third or fourth or fifth shots. Just that he found himself back in his kitchen with an empty pistol.
I tell him to call the cops, and I go into den, sit with my grandson.
And that's the story his attorneys presented when Richard Keach was put on trial for the murder of Nick Candy. They said that while Keach fired that first shot in self-defense, there was more. That understanding what really happened depended not so much on the events of that day or the months preceding the shooting, as what had happened decades earlier, thousands of miles from Southern California, that somehow, standing up to a bully, had snapped Keach back to his time as a prisoner of war, when he stood up to the commandant and faced the brutal Japanese guards. Only this time, Richard Keach had a gun.
What we use PTSD for is to explain Mr. Keach's perceptions of danger.
His lawyers argued Richard Keach was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. You might find that hard to believe, but psychiatrist C. Scott Saunders, an expert in PTSD, says Keach's time as a POW is exactly the kind of life-threatening experience that can trigger the disorder. But can it come back after 50 years? Saunders says it would be very unusual, but not impossible.
People can get long periods of relative calm between flare-ups of the symptoms. But when things go bad, meaning a crisis in their life, a job, relationship, another traumatic event, it typically brings back all the symptoms.
What happened on that date was a cold, calculated, deliberate murder, reeking with motive.
Deputy District Attorney Amy Hanna Broersma.
The facts are an unarmed dad with a car seat, a stroller, and a little hat and sunglasses came on his visitation time to pick up his son, and for no reason whatsoever, Grandpa stepped outside and shot him.
So if Nick Candy's not the bad guy, if he's not a violent, angry, threatening man, and if the flashback wasn't what was going on, whatever prompted a man in his 70s with no record whatsoever to all of a sudden become an assassin?
You know, you'd have to ask him that.
The prosecution argued that if Keach had post-traumatic stress, why hadn't he shown any symptoms for 50 years?
And if Dick Keach had truly been a troubled man who had received benefits from the Veterans Administration, who had utilized the services of the Veterans Administration for problems that he had that were clearly related to World War II, then these facts would have looked different.
During all those years, was the war bothering you? Were you having nightmares, flashbacks?
No.
Did you ever have a very violent episode in those years?
No.
Getting a big fist fight?
No, that's actually...
Shoot at anybody?
No.
Beat somebody up?
Actually, I don't like to shoot. I don't like to see things die. I've never had a gun, and I don't like to hurt people.
Either you're a war hero who just went through a nightmare
and is now on trial for his life, or you're somebody who shot somebody and is trying to get away with it by trading on the suffering and pride of all those American POWs.
I wouldn't lie to keep out of jail. I wouldn't lie to save my life. Again, I'm 78. I don't do.
It was left to the jury to struggle with that central question. If the shooting wasn't the result of a flashback, if Nick Candy was not a threat, why had a peaceful man who had never had any trouble in his life resorted to such violence? Jury foreperson Mary Ann Razzo.
I just thought of it as a man sacrificing his life for his daughter.
It wasn't self-defense or wartime trauma they felt, but a much more basic human emotion. Juror Thomas Kennedy.
He served his country out of love, and he served his daughter out of love.
In the juror's view, Keach's exemplary life all those years actually worked against him. They agreed with prosecutors that if he had been suffering from PTSD, he would have had problems with drugs, alcohol, or needed counseling.
Did you find yourself in some ways wanting to believe that the post-traumatic stress disorder was responsible?
Didn't feel that was a motivation that we could allow ourselves to feel. We were told to separate pity and compassion. I thought of him as a good man, just in an awful, tragic situation.
A good man who deserved life in prison.
We were not to consider a penalty.
The jury reached a verdict after only 5 days of deliberation.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Richard Eugene Keach, guilty of the crime of first-degree murder in violation.
What was the single most important factor in your decision?
The use of the gun, the loading of the weapon on a daily basis during visitations.
What did all those things tell you?
Premeditation.
On January 20th, the judge told Richard Keach, a former prisoner of war, who withstood everything his Japanese captors inflicted on him and triumphed, that he would spend the rest of his life in prison.
As one Marine to another, I now proceed with heavy heart.
In a final statement to the court, Keach invoked the code he had always lived by.
I'm a Marine. All Marines are, ex-Marines are always Marines. I've always done my duty as a devoted husband and father and grandfather. I accept what happens.
Legal experts believe this is the first time a World War II veteran has used the post-traumatic stress defense. And given the age of most World War II vets, it will probably be the last. The case is currently on appeal.
We probably will never know if he probably will fess up, but it's always the excuse. It's always being used, so you probably get the picture. We'll be right back. For the past weeks now, we've been following the shooting in Georgia, what happened in Georgia. Now we're going to hear from the mother. She says, she's speaking out because she says she wants to know the whole, because she needs to know the whole story. She wants to tell the whole story, so take a look.
The mother of accused school shooter Colt Gray is making a moving apology to the victims. I am so sorry from the bottom of my heart, Marcy Gray says in an open letter. She says if she could take the place of the 2 school kids killed in the shooting in Georgia last week, I would, without a second thought. My heart breaks for the 2 teachers who gave their lives while in the service of teaching and protecting our children. She also insists, my son Colt is not a monster. He is my oldest baby. He is quiet, thoughtful, caring, funny, and extremely intelligent. Marcy Gray also confirms in her first interview since the shooting spree that she called a school counselor on the morning of the tragedy after her 14-year-old son texted, "I'm sorry, Mom." She spoke to ABC News.
The counselor said, well, I want to let you know that earlier this morning, one of Colt's teachers had sent me an email that said Colt had been making references to school shootings.
30 minutes later, her son is accused of opening fire. Colt Gray lived with his father, Colin Gray, who has also been charged in the slayings at Appalachia High School outside Atlanta. In her letter of apology, the mother of 3 says, I feel all of your pain and devastation. I grieve and cry with you.
14-year-old Colt Gray is charged with 4 counts of felony murder. His father is charged with involuntary manslaughter and murder for allegedly providing the weapon. Neither have entered a plea.
I know both are probably going to plead guilty, but we won't know until we see the trial. And it'll be a Give Me a Break first. In a Give Me a Break Court TV exclusive, we'll know. We'll know exactly what happened. All right. Okay, let me show you something here. This cop grabs an alligator with nothing but his bare hands. Look at that.
Wrestling a gator is probably not what this Texas police officer had on his to-do list. The Fulshear Police Department says they were called out to a suburban home for a possible intruder. The culprit was spotted on the front porch.
Oh, right there.
The officer had the equipment to capture the juvenile alligator safely, but he decided to go with his bare hands.
I got a pole, but this one's kind of small, so I'll grab it.
Even though the gator was small, his teeth were still sharp, and he clearly didn't want to leave his spot in the shade. Alligators are a protected game animal in the state of Texas. They are no longer endangered, but special permits are required to hunt, raise, or possess alligators. And when one shows up on your property that you'd rather not be there, homeowners are required to get official assistance to have the gator relocated. Look at you, you're a hero. The alligator was moved to a safer place, both for the gator and the humans. For Inside Edition Digital, I'm TC Newman.
Kind of looks like a garfish swimming in the Oasis River. And that's why you ought to have a permit to have alligators in your home to hunt or to raise them. You actually get filet alligators from Walmart, but alligator nuggets, that's a whole different story. And that's all for this edition of Give Me a Break Saturday going to Sunday. We'll see you again for Give Me a Break Monday. For all of us here at YouTube and Give Me a Break, we're up to the first week of our show. Stop bullying, speak up. Concentration, not strength. No jaywalking. Good night.